The NBA has a problem. And before we get into it, if you care about real basketball conversations, the kind that actually question what's happening in the league, make sure you're part of this community. This channel is built for fans who don't just watch the game, but think about it. Now let's talk about what everyone is pretending not to see. Because what happened in a recent Utah Jazz game wasn't basketball strategy. It wasn't player development. And it definitely wasn't about winning. It was something far more dangerous. With just over 3 minutes left in the third quarter against Orlando, Lauri Markkanen finished a layup that pushed his total to 27 points and gave Utah an 8-point lead. He was cooking. He was the best player on the floor. And that moment? That was the end of his night. Markkanen never checked back in. He finished the game with 27 points, and the Jazz went on to lose by 3. So naturally, fans asked the obvious question, what injury did Lauri Markkanen suffer that caused him to miss the final 15 minutes of a game his team was winning? The answer? The same mysterious injury that keeps popping up across the league. The kind that doesn't show up on film, doesn't require treatment, and somehow only appears when winning becomes inconvenient. Utah entered the fourth quarter with a 7-point lead, and instead of pushing for a win, 4 of their 5 starters didn't play another minute. Not eased out, not managed carefully, flat out benched. Yes, one player actually picked up an injury, but Utah still made a deliberate decision to sit their 2 best players, the top scorers on the floor, and their starting center. They didn't hide it. They didn't dress it up. They played the rest of that game with one clear objective: lose. And here's the scary part. Utah isn't alone. Look at what's happening in Washington. The Wizards have already shut down Anthony Davis and Trae Young for the rest of the season. Anthony Davis, who was playing just weeks ago, suddenly suffers a hand injury that conveniently ends his year. Trae Young, who reportedly sprained his knee, is now out for months. Season over. No timeline, no urgency. And what makes this even more absurd is that Washington wasn't winning with these players. But there was at least a chance that a few games might accidentally go the wrong way. Meaning, the right way for fans. So instead, they sit everyone. They're rolling out lineups filled with players who weren't even in the league a few years ago. Players on short-term deals. Players with nothing at stake. At least Utah can argue they want to give younger prospects more minutes. Washington doesn't even have that excuse. Keontae George and Alex Sarr are in year 2. This is the exact stage of their careers where development matters most. And yet they're being shelved. Not because they can't help, but because they might. One night, Washington put a roster on the floor worth roughly $13 million in total salary. Let that sink in. One mid-level role player elsewhere in the league makes more than the entire Wizards lineup from that game. And why? Because of injuries to second-year players who should be building rhythm, confidence, and reps. And this isn't limited to 2 teams. Even before the season started, Brooklyn's ownership openly hinted at their direction. When an owner publicly talks about draft positioning months in advance, the message is clear. The strategy isn't subtle anymore. Tanking is being normalized, and it's spreading. Indiana is next in line. Because of how their future pick protections work, finishing in the bottom tier suddenly becomes a calculated advantage. Finish low enough, and it's a coin flip. Finish higher, and the odds collapse. You don't need inside information to predict how teams respond to incentives like that. This isn't coincidence. This isn't paranoia. This is logic. And there's a reason all of this is happening at once. The upcoming draft isn't just good. It's being treated like a franchise reset button. Multiple prospects are being talked about as legitimate number 1 level talents. Not maybes. Not projects. Cornerstones. Teams see the prize, and they've decided the cost, integrity, competition, fans in the building is acceptable. That's the real issue. Not tanking in theory, but tanking so openly that nobody even pretends otherwise. And if this continues, the NBA isn't just risking bad optics. It's risking trust, because fans aren't stupid, and they're starting to notice. Everyone understands there's value in finishing low in the draft. That's not new. What is new is how early teams are giving up. We're barely past the halfway point of the season. The All-Star break hasn't even arrived yet. And yet, some teams are already acting like the year is over. Take Utah, for example. If they win that game against Orlando, they're 17-36. Is that great? No. But in today's NBA, that's not dead either. The play-in exists for a reason. We've seen crazier things happen. Teams go on unexpected runs every single year. No one predicted double-digit winning streaks from bottom-tier rosters, yet it happens. There is always a chance, however small, and that's the point. Utah isn't losing because they can't compete. They're forfeiting the possibility of competing. With more than 30 games left on the schedule, they've already decided the outcome. That decision shouldn't be happening in March, let alone before the season even hits its final stretch. If a team truly wants to tank, there's a responsible way to do it. You move your veterans. You trade your win-now pieces. You accept that you're rebuilding and you lean into development. You give your young players heavy minutes. You let them play through mistakes. You live with the losses. What you don't do is tank on top of tanking. Washington is the perfect example. They've already stripped the roster down. They've already pivoted to youth. That alone guarantees losses. So why sit second-year players? Why remove even the possibility of growth? That's not strategy. That's fear of accidentally winning. And let's not pretend the league doesn't see this. The NBA has already shown it understands the issue. A few years ago, Dallas was fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for sitting players late in the season while still mathematically alive. The difference wasn't the rest itself, it was the honesty. The mistake was saying the quiet part out loud. They admitted the goal was to lose, and the league stepped in. That fine wasn't about one star resting. It was about intent. Here's where the hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore. That situation happened at the very end of the season. What we're seeing now is far worse. Teams are manipulating lineups with a third of the schedule still to play, and somehow that's being treated as normal. At the same time, the league talks endlessly about integrity. Individual players are investigated for gambling, shot attempts, and rotations, and yet entire organizations are openly removing competition from the floor. If integrity truly matters, this is the real test. Because a single missed shot will never damage the league the way deliberate, season-long losing does. And the real question isn't whether tanking exists, it's whether the NBA is willing to stop it. Fine isn't going to stop this. It never was. To these franchises, a financial penalty is pocket change. It's the equivalent of charging a regular fan $10 and calling it accountability. That's not deterrence. That's symbolism. And this is exactly why the NBA introduced flattened lottery odds in the first place. After the infamous era of extreme tanking, the league tried to remove the incentive. The bottom three teams now share the same odds at the top pick, while teams just outside that range still have a real chance. In fact, the last two number one picks didn't even go to teams near the very bottom. From that angle, the system is technically working. But here's the problem. It didn't stop tanking. It just changed the math. Teams understand that if they finish in the bottom three, the worst-case scenario is picking fourth or fifth. And in a draft this loaded, that's still incredibly valuable. When the talent pool runs deep, the risk feels minimal. So organizations push the limits. They don't need to guarantee the top pick. They just need to avoid accidentally winning. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Some teams genuinely deserve lottery help. Rebuilding franchises need access to elite talent. Everyone knows that. Washington, for example, clearly needs a reset. They're young. They're rebuilding. No one is denying them a chance at a high pick, but how you get there matters. There's a difference between being bad and choosing not to compete, between rebuilding and removing effort entirely. What fans are reacting to isn't losing, it's the feeling of being manipulated. Which brings us to the most ironic part of this entire situation. Because in a league filled with teams actively trying to lose, there is one franchise unintentionally standing out. One team that shows up every night with the apparent intention of winning and still loses anyway. The Sacramento Kings. They play their veterans heavy minutes. They give extended run to players well past their prime. They prioritize experience over development. They don't hide behind injury reports or fourth quarter disappearances. They try. They genuinely try. And somehow, they're still at the bottom. It's almost poetic. In a league gaming the system, Sacramento is failing honestly. And as strange as it sounds, that's exactly why fans are jokingly saluting them. Not because they're good, but because they're transparent. Now, when it comes to fixing this, the league can't keep pretending it's powerless. Investigations already exist. Medical evaluations exist. oversight exists. If the NBA can scrutinize individual players, contracts, and off-court arrangements, then it can absolutely look into patterns of unexplained absences, sudden shutdowns, and strategic fourth-quarter benchings. This isn't about micromanaging rotations. It's about protecting competition. Because what's the point of an 82-game season if a significant portion of it is played without the intent to win? What's the value of standings, records, and playoff races if the outcome is being quietly decided months in advance? Fans aren't asking for perfection. They're asking for honesty. And if the NBA doesn't address this soon, the league risks something far more damaging than bad press. It risks losing credibility. Because once fans stop believing the games matter, everything else collapses with it.